the future with proportionate regulation and oversight. I'm happy to engage with her in more detail on the subject she mentioned.
Question, Melanie On.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can the Chancellor please provide an update on the invaluable Viking CCS project in the Humber?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. And at the spending review, we were enabled to build on the investment we had already made in Merseyside and Teesside with track 1 of carbon capture and storage, and put investment into both the Acorn project in Scotland and also Viking in the Humber to support this government's ambitions for Britain to lead the way in carbon capture and storage, creating more good jobs in all parts of the country, including in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
That completes questions. Let front bench change over. We now come to statements. Minister, Justin Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I wish to make a statement on the Government's manifesto commitment to review the system of entitlements to parental leave. This Government is dedicated to delivering more for working families. Our plan to make work pay is central to how we achieve this. The mission to grow the economy, raise living standards across the country and create opportunities for all. It will help people to stay in work, improve job security and boost living standards. This includes helping working parents and supporting them to balance their work and home lives. Parental leave and pay entitlements play a key role in this. We know that the arrival of a child, whether through birth or adoption, is a transformative time in a family's life. And we know that the current parental leave system does not support modern diverse working families as well as it could. For example, parents groups and campaigners have long argued that our paternity leave is too short and compares poorly with other countries. And whilst shared parental leave is available to families where fathers and partners want to take a longer period, evidence shows that take-up is very low. The Parental Rights Survey reported that 1% of all mothers and 4% of all fathers are using this entitlement. In addition, the survey also showed that 35% of fathers are not taking paternity leave due to financial reasons. We're committed to improving the current parental leave system and are already taking action. Improving this system will have the added benefit of increasing workforce participation by helping employers fill vacancies. It will also contribute to increased productivity, benefiting the economy. The Employment Rights Bill is one vehicle through which we are improving the parental leave system. This bill makes paternity leave and parental leave day one rights, meaning that employees will be eligible to give notice of their intent to take leave from their first day of employment. The bill also contains a number of other measures which will improve the support working families receive. It will put in place legislation that makes it unlawful to dismiss pregnant women, mothers on maternity leave and mothers who come back to work for a 6-month period after they return, except in specific circumstances. It will also make flexible working the default, except where not reasonably feasible. And it requires that all large employers produce action plans which will contribute to closing the gender pay gap. So I'm pleased to announce today that this government is going further and is taking another step forward in delivering improvements for working families. I'm pleased to launch the parental leave review today, fulfilling our commitments in the plan to make work pay to review the parental leave system to ensure that it best supports working families. The review will form part of delivering the plan for change, linking two of the government's missions to kickstart economic growth and break down barriers to opportunity. The work of this review will support this government's commitments to raising living standards and giving children the best start in life. It also links to work being undertaken to alleviate child poverty. This review presents a much-needed opportunity to consider our approach to the system of parental leave and pay, giving due consideration to balancing costs and benefits to both businesses and the Exchequer. And I welcome the opportunity to provide the House today with more detail on this review. This review will be co-led by the Department of Business and Trade and the Department of Work and Pensions. The two departments who have the main responsibility for the current parental leave framework. There will, however, be close working across government to deliver this review to reflect the wide influence the parental leave system has on the policies in other departments. The current system has grown up gradually over time. For example, the first maternity arrangements were set out in the Factory and Workshop Act of 1891, which introduced the idea that women who work in factories cannot work for 4 weeks after giving birth. Subsequent entitlements have been added to support specific groups as needs have emerged. This has created a framework that does not always work cohesively as a whole. This piecemeal approach to parental leave and pay means that the system has never had an overarching set of objectives for what it should deliver. This review presents an opportunity to reset our approach and understanding of parental leave and pay and what we want the system to achieve. We will use the review to establish what Britain needs from a parental leave and pay system, supporting our modern economy and delivering improvements for working families. We have set 4 objectives as our starting point. We intend to test these objectives as we progress the review to make sure that we are truly reflecting the needs of the nation. Our first objective is to support the physical and mental health of women during pregnancy and after giving birth to a child. Our second objective is to support economic growth by enabling more parents to stay in work and advance in their careers after starting a family. This will particularly focus on improving both women's labour market outcomes and tackling the gender pay gap. Our third objective is to ensure that there are sufficient resources and time away from work to support new and expectant parents' well-being. This will also include facilitating the best start in life for babies and young children, supporting health and development outcomes. Our fourth objective is to support parents to make balanced childcare choices that work for their family situation, including enabling co-parenting and providing flexibility to reflect the realities of modern work and childcare needs. There are 3 cross-cutting considerations which will also be factored into our review. The first is to build a fair parental leave system between parents within a family, different types of parents, and parents with different employment statuses. The second consideration is to balance costs and benefits to businesses and the Exchequer, as well as examining how the system can support economic opportunities for businesses and families. As part of this, the review will consider opportunities to make the process surrounding parental leave simpler for both businesses and parents. The final cross-cutting consideration focuses on improving our society, for example, in supporting the child poverty strategy and on shifting social and gender norms, including around paternal child care. All current and upcoming parental leave and pay entitlements will be in the scope of the review. This will enable us to consider how the parental leave and pay system should operate as a complete system to improve the support available for working families. This broad scope means the review will consider the individual existing entitlements and how best to ensure improvements can be delivered for working families, as well as related wider issues and themes. For example, the review will consider whether support available meets the needs of other working families who do not qualify for existing statutory leave and pay entitlements, such as kinship carers and self-employed parents. It will also consider how the pay system works more broadly. This will be an evidence-based review that reflects and considers the perspectives and experiences of those who engage with the parental leave and pay system. We welcome views from and intend to engage constructively with a wide range of external stakeholders, both from groups representing parents and families, including trade unions, and with employers or employers' representatives. There will be opportunities for stakeholders to contribute views and expertise throughout the review, including through a call for evidence which also launches today. This call for evidence seeks initial evidence specifically in relation to the objectives which will set the foundation for what we want our system to deliver. This review launches today, Mr. Speaker. We expect it to run for a period of 18 months. The Government will conclude the review with a set of findings and a roadmap, including next steps for any potential reforms forward to implementation. This is an important step forward to ensure that our workplaces are fit for the 21st century, and I commend this statement to the House.
Senate Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. From personal experience as a father of 3, I understand the importance of fathers being able to spend time at home with their newborns and supporting mothers in those early days. Having experienced paternity leave both as a Member of Parliament in 2020 and 2021, as well as very differently in 2016 while self-employed, I am proud that the UK does already offer some of the most generous maternity and paternity rights, but of course, there is always room for improvement. Indeed, Conservatives introduced shared parental leave, allowing new parents to spend precious time caring for their newborns. It is therefore with interest that we digest the contents of this ministerial statement today. However, I do have deep reservations about both its substance and its timing. I understand the government pledged that this review would be done and dusted within a year, another broken promise. But it's curious that they've chosen today, of all days, to launch it. I'm in no doubt that today's statement has been rushed into the minister's hands to deflect from what I suspect will be a difficult day of parliamentary business for the government. That much is clear, since the Secretary of State was entirely incapable of confirming how much statutory paternity pay currently is on LBC this morning. I welcome the fact the Secretary of State apologised to Nick Ferrari in admitting he really should know, and perhaps the Minister can set the record straight for his boss today. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to make it crystal clear that Conservatives are not opposed to increased parental leave, so long as it is proportionate, affordable, and does not increase unemployment. But therein lies the problem, because this government has left themselves no breathing room. Their political choices have imposed the most significant headwinds on business in a generation. Those choices have driven unemployment up by 173,000 since July last year. Businesses across the land are now contending with taxes on jobs that Labour promised would never come. And now they are staring down the barrel of 300 pages of closely typed union-led red tape in the unemployment bill, which will upset a carefully balanced and fair relationship between employees and employers that has spanned decades. Even Tony Blair and Gordon Brown refused to open that box. No real business supports that bill. The 5 biggest business groups have warned against it. It will make hiring tougher and force employers to take fewer risks on new starters, disproportionately pushing young mothers out of the workforce. Flexible working will be almost entirely eviscerated from Britain's job market. The reasonable measures which employers and employees have benefited from for years that allow businesses to take a chance on new hires. We already know business across the UK have had no choice but to cut jobs, reduce hours, or put hiring on pause because of the Chancellor's toxic treatment towards enterprise. So if it's helpful, I can spell it out for the benefit of the government front bench. It really is quite straightforward. It is not possible to benefit from employment rights if people don't have a job in the first place. And with that in mind, it deeply concerns me that the Minister's statement made only a passing mention to the impact on business. This comes as no surprise, since not one person around the Cabinet table has any real business experience. The government have admitted that this review, which they said would be squared away by now, will take 18 months. Over the next 18 months, we will watch the ravaging impacts of Labour's anti-business policies transform from a drip to a deluge. The jobs tax, business rates relief cut, investment and capital forced overseas, the employment rights bill, the family business death tax, unemployment will continue to rise. Businesses will close, and any chance of growth will be sapped from our economy. So it's all well and good that the Minister announces this review in the House today. But, Mr. Speaker, let us be in no doubt. When it concludes in a year and a half's time, Britain's economy will have been stripped of all signs of life because of the choices Labour have made.
Minister.
Well, I take that the Shadow Minister is not in support of the review. Can I just correct him on a few points? Of course, it's not coincidence that this is being announced today, because it was a clear manifesto pledge that we would launch the review within 1 year of taking office. And of course, this week we do celebrate that astounding election victory. it is £187.18 for statutory paternity pay. We know from representations that we've had already that many do not think that is a right level. He mentioned how Tony Blair and Gordon Brown refused to open this box, but of course it was actually under their government that we got a right to statutory paternity pay and a number of other family-friendly rights, which of course the Shadow Minister has taken advantage of. And I think we know where the Conservative Party stand on these issues when their leader says maternity pay has gone too far. I don't quite know what she meant by that, but I think it means that they would be rolling back some of the well-earned gains in terms of family-friendly policies. And of course the Shadow Minister, as I would expect, doesn't miss an opportunity to mention the Employment Rights Bill. Could I suggest he has a word with his Secretary of State, who clearly hasn't read it? I refer to his recent open letter to businesses where he mentioned a number of issues in relation to the bill. First of all, he complained that we're creating the Fair Work Agency, conveniently forgetting that both in the 2017 and 2019 Conservative Party manifestos there was a similar pledge to create a single enforcement body. He refers to an introductory measure on electronic industrial action balloting, which of course Conservatives will be big fans of electronic voting given the number of leadership elections they have taken part in recent years. The Shadow Minister needs to inform his Shadow Secretary of State that that isn't in the bill. So I don't know where he thinks that has come from. We are going to introduce electronic balloting, but it isn't something that's in the Employment Rights Bill because we already have existing powers to implement that. And he also mentioned the Shadow Secretary of State, most curiously in this letter, that there was going to be in the bill a trade union right to roam. Now, I don't know whether he was searching for a new mobile phone contract at the time, but no such right exists. And of course, the Shadow Minister talks about the effect on employment. He needs to keep up to date with the latest Lloyd's Business Barometer, which says that business confidence is now at a 9-year high, and that 60% of firms expect higher staffing levels in the next year. That is a sign, Mr. Speaker, of this government getting things done.
Chair of the Women Equalities Committee, Sarah Owens.
Mr. Speaker, before I start, I want to say that it's great to see so many and almost every single party represented here but one. The 4 empty chairs in front of us for the Reform MPs, they like to bang on about family values, but when it comes to actually standing up for dads, standing up for parents, they're nowhere to be seen. I'd like to thank the Minister, my honourable friend, for acting on the importance of shared parental leave. And on paternity leave, as someone who had a C-section, I was so grateful to my husband's employers for granting more than 2 weeks leave because, as everyone knows, if you have a C-section, you're not supposed to lift up a kettle for even 6 weeks. It's impossible. However, we also know that not everybody is that fortunate. This is especially true for self-employed people. The Women and Equalities Committee took evidence on parental leave and heard that nearly a third of self-employed dads and other parents didn't take a single day's leave following the birth of their child. So how will this review ensure that self-employed parents' needs will be taken into account?
Minister.
I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for her contribution. She's raised a very important point, and we are studying the committee's recent reports on this issue with interest. It is important that we look at how all those in the different forms of employment are able to take advantage of parental leave in one form or another, because it is really important, as my honourable friend mentioned, not just for the physical assistance in the particular circumstances she mentioned, but actually for bonding with the child, that the parents should be there in those early weeks if they can be at all, and that is something that the review will definitely be considering.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Olby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for the advance sight of the statement. The Liberal Democrats welcome the government's commitment to the much-needed review on parental leave. Every child deserves the best possible start in life and the opportunity to flourish no matter their background or personal circumstances. Too often, parents struggle on inadequate parental pay and without good enough access to shared leave. Childcare costs are eye-watering, and the balance between family life and work has only become harder and harder to strike. The Liberal Democrats have been calling for an overhaul of the parental leave system to give parents a genuine choice over how they manage their responsibilities in the first months of their child's life. And if I could just gently correct the Shadow Minister, the Liberal Democrats were proud to introduce shared parental leave in government. However, years later, millions of parents are still being denied the choice to spend more time at home, with around a quarter of fathers ineligible for paternity pay. So as we welcome this review into parental leave, I urge the government to look more broadly into the prevalent inequality in caring responsibilities. And I ask, what steps are they taking to support the millions of family carers who are looking after disabled or elderly relatives who have no paid leave at all? Will they commit to a similar review into provision for unpaid carers and to make carers leave paid? And I ask the Minister if they will commit to reviewing the needs of carers and those of the families who have taken on kinship caring responsibilities. I welcome that commitment in his statement today, but can I ask about the government's plans to introduce statutory kinship care leave? So we're calling on the government to use this review to finally deliver meaningful reforms that address the long-standing concerns of carers and their loved ones, as well as making the changes to the circumstances of working families that can make parenting a joy rather than a burden, and end the dilemma of having to choose between work and family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the support from the Liberal Democrats on this issue? And she was right to point out that, of course, it was in the coalition government that shared parental leave. I think that's the first time in a long time we've actually heard anyone admit that they were part of the coalition government. There we go. She raised some very important points. I think that a number of these issues will be covered by the Carers Leave review, which is also taking place. Kinship caring is going to be part of this particular review. Obviously, I know that Liberal Democrats have a long-standing policy on carers leave and pay. Clearly, that's something that review will also be taking cognizance of.
Antonio.
Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the announcement made by the Minister today. I think of the HGV driver that I met recently who said to me that he wasn't able to take the time off to be with his partner and their newborn baby. And I would like to hear the Minister assure me and all of my constituents that these new rights will work for working class people as well as people on higher incomes in professional jobs. And would the Minister agree with me that with today's announcement, with our free school meals announcement, with our childcare announcements and with our announcements on housing, it is now clear that the Labour Party are the party of the family?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. I think one of the real achievements of the last Labour government was to recognise giving children the best start in life is absolutely fundamental to rebuilding our society, and that is something that is at the heart of what we've proposed today. Now, I think she does raise an important point that actually these entitlements do have an element of income inequality to them. That is something that we're going to be bearing in mind. One of the messages we've had very clearly is that many fathers in particular would like to take more paternity leave but just simply can't afford to, and that's something that we will be looking at as part of the review.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. Having a child is a personal choice, and it's a blessing that I've enjoyed 5 times. Becoming old, becoming sick and becoming disabled are not personal choices, and yet we've had cuts to winter fuel allowance, and we're about to discuss a bill controversially in this House that would remove a large element of the support we currently give sick and disabled people. What does that say about the government's priorities?
Well, the honourable member will know that the winter fuel allowance has been restored for many people in this country, and there's actually been a very clear commitment, the Chancellor just gave it, that actually any existing claimants of PIP will not be affected by the announcement. One of the things that we are looking at in the round as well is how we ensure that people are able to be supported to stay in work as part of the Charlie Mayfield review, and that is something I think is actually something I would have hoped the Conservatives would support as well.
Mark Seward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the Minister's statement today? As a recent dad with 2 very recent experiences, I know just how valuable paternity leave is for fathers, and good companies do as well. I note that Tesco and other good employers have already increased the paternity leave offer for their employees because they know a good workforce is a happy workforce. So can I encourage the Minister to actively pursue those companies that have already increased their paternity leave offers to get their data and insights fed into the review with a view to permanently increase paternity leave?
Minister.
Well, can I congratulate my honourable friend on his recent parenthood and also pay tribute to the honourable member for York Outer, who I understand is on paternity leave as we speak. Now, he has mentioned a very important point about businesses, good businesses understanding the importance of treating their staff well. I would like to draw the House's attention to a quote from the Chief People Officer for Aviva, who operate a very progressive parental leave policy. He said, "The chance to spend more time with the new arrival during the important first few months has proved to be hugely beneficial for thousands of our Aviva parents, from supporting their partners to the positive impact it has on mental well-being and engagement with family life. Equal parental leave has been literally life-changing for our people." Those are the sort of things that we would want to encourage businesses to look at. I'm sure some will be doing equally well on that, and we're happy to hear any evidence on these matters.
Hi, Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As someone who's about to welcome their second child into the world, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be discussing parental leave, and I welcome this review. I note that the Minister said that one of the objectives of this, to paraphrase, is to reset the relationship between men and women and to make that more equal. Might I suggest gently that this is necessary but not sufficient, and really to get to the heart of that matter we need to look at early years funding. When you have a gap, when it's £6.12 provided by the government, £6.12p, and providers in my constituency like the Little Learning Tree say that it's £7.50 for delivery, I think we have a problem there that's going to mean that the parental leave review is not going to get to the heart of that matter. Would the Minister consider including the Department of Education in this review so that we can actually get to the heart of equality between men and women?
Well, the honourable member raises an important point. Clearly, this government has done great work already in expanding the availability of affordable childcare, but there is always more to do. Now, this won't be something that is specifically part of the review, but I can confirm that we will be working with other departments to see how their input can help in terms of the outcomes that we want to achieve with this review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the fathers that met with me in Haslingden will really welcome this review and the announcement today from the Minister. But in the conversations I've had, I've been really struck by the challenges specifically for some of our public sector workers. Teachers being almost forced back, a week, maybe if they've been able to take that after a holiday period, and police officers as well, particularly challenged around not being able to access parental leave and paternity rights. So will the Minister reassure me that this will be absolutely squarely within the terms of the review, and he'll be looking to make progress on these important issues?
Minister.
Well, I think my honourable friend raises some concerning issues, possibly about the culture at some of these employees who don't see the value of parental and paternity leave. Look, I think we all know that recruitment and retention in teaching is a particular issue. Actually, particularly, there aren't enough male teachers as well. That's a challenge, and maybe one of the things that's behind that is part of that cultural shift that we need to see. So I'm sure that those comments can be fed in.
Thank you, sir. My constituent, Christina Harris, very sadly lost her job when she had to take time off to care for her very seriously ill daughter, Sky, who I'm pleased to report is now in remission. Christina started a parliamentary petition calling for employers to hold open the jobs of parents who, through no fault of their own, have to take time off to care for a very seriously ill child, a bit like maternity leave in principle. She achieved a debate in Westminster Hall in February, which the Minister replied to, and then very kindly he met with her some weeks later, and if I may say so, dealt with her incredibly empathetically and listened very carefully to what she said. I was there. As he said the review will have a broad scope, his words, can he offer my constituent Christina Harris any hope with regards to her idea, and any hope for the approximately 4,000 parents each year who find themselves, through no fault of their own, in similar circumstances?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question, and it was indeed a pleasure to meet Christina, his constituent. She raised a very important issue, which we know is not isolated. There is, as he will know, a carers leave review which is being undertaken, which I think is probably the more appropriate forum for this issue, but I know that it is something that he will continue to passionately campaign on, and I look forward to further engagement on that matter.
Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first pay tribute to the Prime Minister and the Business Secretary, along with many others, for leading from the front on the importance of their own role as fathers. I truly believe that paternity leave is the single most important thing that this government can do to improve the lives of families and women too. And I really hope that we can get to providing 6 weeks paternity leave paid by the government at 90% of pay. Employer support, though, is going to be critical to making this a success. So does the Minister agree with me that this review is an opportunity to engage and provide clarity to businesses on how to work with paternity leave and parental leave?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. One of the things that's become clear, not particularly in relation to paternity leave, but in relation to shared parental leave, is actually employers often find it difficult to navigate the system, never mind the parents. But that is something that we will be considering and looking at as part of the review.
Kirsty Blackman.
Only 3% of women surveyed by Maternity Action had no financial worries during the course of their pregnancy. Given how awful the statistic is, will the Minister commit to listening to those with lived experience and actually co-producing the outcomes of this review with those people who've been through these situations?
Well, the honourable member makes a very important point. We, of course, will be taking representations from all interested parties. There is a call for evidence which is now live, will be up for a period of 8 weeks, and we'd encourage any bodies who have got important things to say to feed that in as part of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alongside this government's actions on increasing the provision of affordable, available and accessible childcare, I strongly welcome this review as a real step forward. Does the Minister agree with me that for many, the complexities of the system we've got form a real barrier to accessing it, and for low-paid workers in particular, the provision of unpaid leave just makes it simply unaffordable? And will he commit that this review will have at its heart true accessibility of the system so that people can take proper advantage of it and benefit along with their children?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. As a recently new father himself, he will know the system itself. And one of the things that we do here, and as he's rightly referred to, is the complexity of the system and actually the lack of availability and opportunity for those particularly in low-paid occupations, as well as those who are not directly employed. These are all things, Mr. Speaker, that we will be considering as part of the review.
Lisa Scott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is, of course, to be welcomed that the government is having a look at how best to support all families of all shapes and sizes in the early weeks and months of a child life. And I know the Minister knows that there is currently a gap for those who are self-employed looking to grow their family through adoption, because we have corresponded on the matter. I listened very carefully to the Minister's comments, and he talked about adoption, he talked about self-employment, but I wonder if he could give constituents like Kirsty from Marple the reassurance that she is looking for, that there will be an explicit stream of this work looking at self-employed adopters who currently don't get any financial support from the government.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her question. She has, as she's referred to, raised this before, and I think it's a very, very important point. Having had some involvement in the adoption system myself recently, I do understand that it doesn't really fit in terms of the current rights system. So it is important that we look at that in the round. And of course, as I've already mentioned, Mr. Speaker, those who are currently excluded from the system altogether because they are self-employed or in some other working relationship which doesn't fit within the current statutory parameters will also be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I very much welcome this review. I think most people who are in this room, with some exceptions, recognise that supporting families and supporting children is in our national interest, and I'm very pleased to hear the government recognise and commit that parental leave, particularly for dads, is just not enough right now. I am concerned about the timescale for where we'll be able to make progress on this issue and the implications for mothers who may actually face more discrimination when they have protected rights if dads don't. So as a holding measure, given there is general consensus that we do need to do more to support fathers, will the Minister accept the amendment that's been put forward in the Lords by Baroness Penn to introduce the recommendations of the Select Committee of, by the end of this Parliament, introducing a right to 6 weeks parental leave for the second parent paid at 90% of salary, and that we can make a difference for every parent within this lifetime?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. Now, of course, if I was to accept specific recommendations at this point, it would be rather preempting the review, but I have to say I do hear the arguments that have been made, and obviously the other place will decide how they want to proceed with various amendments to the Employment Rights Bill. I just hope they hurry up with it.
Mr. Speaker, may I add my voice to welcoming this review as chair of the APPG, and this review is a step in the right direction in correcting a decade of Tory failure on this issue. The Tories thought that giving dads 2 weeks of paternity leave and allowing them to break it up into 1 week chunks was progress. I note that fathers were not in the 4 objectives announced by the Minister, so does he accept that you can't achieve those 4 objectives without better paternity leave and pay? For example, you can't achieve good physical and mental health of women in afterbirth without addressing the rights of fathers and birthing partners. And does he accept, and if he accepts this, will he agree to meet with the APPG of fatherhood throughout this review?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. Of course, I'm happy to meet with the APPG as part of this review. He said there was no explicit reference to fathers in the 4 objectives, but I would suggest actually our general references to parents do include fathers. So, for example, the second objective is to support economic growth by enabling more parents to stay in work, and the 4th objective is to support parents to make balanced childcare choices that work for their family situation, including enabling co-parenting. I believe that does clearly address the point that the honourable member has raised.
Daniel Francis.
Speaker, as the father of twins, I saw the impact that there's an increased complexity of children being born early, all with disability, and the mental health aspects of leaving your loved one at home with multiples when you go back to work. So in that wider review, could we be looking at those mental health aspects for mothers, particularly in the case of multiple births?
Minister.
The honourable member raises an interesting point. I have to say it's not one that I've considered in terms of whether there needs to be an additional approach for multiple births, but I'm happy to see any evidence that he submits on behalf of that particular group as part of the review.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone will know that I want to see life-affirming laws restored to the United Kingdom. Therefore, underpinning the birth of a child with adequate parental leave is of utmost importance, given the very important needs before and after birth. Will the Minister confirm that this will look at the issue of premature births and ensuring that mum and dads who are blessed to have a preemie baby are not disadvantaged? And will the Minister ensure that learning here is related to Northern Ireland, to the devolved assembly, so that they too can make progress in this regard?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her question. Of course, we will want to work with all devolved nations on these important matters. I think it's fair to say we would hope that any changes or improvements that are made are spread throughout the nation.
Alice MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the review. We should also recognise that the journey to becoming a parent is not a straightforward one, with the equivalent of 1 child in every UK classroom born through IVF. As he knows, and we've discussed, there are glaring gaps in employment law with no statutory right to fertility treatment. So could the review also look at this and recognise that sometimes you also need leave to become a parent?
Minister.
I recognise the honourable member's comments and the long-standing campaign that she has raised on this issue. Of course, IVF is very much more commonplace than it was when these laws were originally introduced, and the process of securing pregnancy in those situations is a very different issue. It's not something, I'm afraid, that is part of the review, because we are looking at what happens at the point of birth, but of course I'm happy to continue to engage with her on the wider points.
Jess Brownfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A key barrier for many women returning to the workplace after starting a family is the challenge of balancing work with feeding their child. There is a lack of facilities in many workplaces with no provision for expressing or the storing of breast milk. So will the review consider improving provisions for breastfeeding parents and the need for individuals to be given breaks to do so?
I'm all right. Minister.
Well, that's a very interesting point that is probably slightly outside the scope of the review, because that's probably more about how people are dealt with in the workplace. This is really about making sure that we've got the structures in place to ensure that people can balance their parenting needs with the ability to carry on in work and actually make the most of those opportunities. I'm happy to correspond with her on this matter, though, because I think that is a very interesting point that's been raised.
Josh Dubry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a supporter of the Dad Shift campaign, I wholeheartedly welcome this statement. One of my constituents told me that after the birth of both his children, his wife had complications. First time round, he was only able to take 2 weeks off, and then had to return to his 40-mile commute, leaving his wife to recover whilst caring for a newborn. Second time round, his employer had been bought out by a Belgian firm, so he was able to take far longer off to fully support his wife. Would the Minister agree with me that boosting paternity leave entitlement would go a long way to closing the gender pay gap?
Minister.
I thank the honourable friend for his question. I've met with the Dad Shift myself. I've held an event in my constituency, and they do put forward a very articulate case as to why paternity leave is falling down. I reflect on my own experiences some time ago. I think my first child was born before paternity leave was introduced. Yes, I am that old. And my second was after paternity leave had been enabled in law. And the experiences were like chalk and cheese. And I think it does speak to the importance of enabling fathers to have some of that time off at those early, crucial weeks.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome this review, and in particular I'd like to welcome the fact that it is going to look at leave for kinship carers. The Minister will know that I and my Liberal Democrat colleagues have long been campaigning for statutory paid leave for kinship carers, given the sacrifice they make and given how many fall out of the workforce when they take on those responsibilities. So could I press him that maybe within this 18-month timeline for the whole review, that on kinship care leave, that might be an area that he looks to fast forward, because the economic case, both short-term and long-term, is so strong that, frankly, he ought to be able to move on that particular aspect quicker than some of the other ones that he's got to consider.
Well, can I just say, Mr. Speaker, I recognise the consistent campaigning on this particular issue, and I pay tribute to the work that kinship carers have done to take on those responsibilities, and I think there is a very articulate case made about the contribution that they make to society as a whole. I don't think it would be appropriate for us to short-circuit the review to deal with particular groups. I think we do need to look at the system as a whole. That is one of the deficiencies in the current system, that it has been built up over many years in a very piecemeal way, and it doesn't have the holistic approach that we are now seeking to introduce.
Deirdre Custon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's 55 years, over half a century, since the Equal Pay Act, yet women are still paid less than men. And the quote I read about 20 years ago in a newspaper article, which said childcare was catastrophic for women's careers, still could be quoted today. But the employment rights bill that this government has brought forward is ensuring businesses don't just publish their gender pay gap, they will now have to do something about it with mandatory action plans. So could the Minister tell us how today's parental leave review will help further reduce the gender pay gap and finally deliver equality for working women?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my honourable friend for her question and for her consistent campaigning on this issue. She is right to point out that the Employment Rights Bill has important advances in this area, but this review also will be I hope, a positive impact on the gender pay gap. In particular, the second objective of the review is to make sure that we enable parents to stay in work and advance their careers after starting a family. And this will particularly focus on both the women's labour market and its outcomes, and tackling, of course, the gender pay gap.
Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for the statement today. It's positive, and thank him for that. I wish to ask a question if I can, Minister. The fact that parents cannot share the leave between them leaves a sense of one primary caregiver, which is not an accurate picture for most households anymore in today's age that we live in. Indeed, over 50% of households in Northern Ireland are dual income, meaning that childcare needs are shared. So would the Minister and Government in the pilot scheme consider ensuring that mothers and fathers can use the leave between them as needed, as opposed to the leave being used by one parent solely? And will the Minister commit to this being part of the review? Thank you so much.
Minister.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure to hear from the honourable gentleman. He raises an important point about how the current shared parental leave system isn't working, and I think that we've seen from the figures that the number of people taking advantage of that is in the low single figures in terms of percentages. That is something that we're very aware of and something that we will be looking at very closely as part of the review.
Speaker, can I warmly welcome this, and I know that families and dads in St Helens North will welcome it as well. I'm also sure that Jay White, who runs the Dad Matters organisation in St Helens, supporting new dads and doing a great job, will warmly welcome this as well. With dads from across the country and across the chambers, we've already heard, I've been supporting the Dad Shift campaign, saying that 2 weeks isn't enough, because I know from personal experience that it isn't, and from speaking to new dads across St Helens, I know that it isn't. Can the Minister please confirm, for the benefit of dads in St Helens North and elsewhere, that the current state of paternity leave, including consultation with employers, will be a key focus for this review? Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's absolutely right to identify the current paternity leave measures as being something of concern to fathers and indeed all parents across the country. That is something that will certainly be a large focus of the review.
Come around.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And does the Minister agree with me that, as well as being good for parents and good for children, ensuring that dads are able to spend an appropriate amount of time off with their newborn children would be good for our economy, good for productivity and good for businesses too?
Minister.
Yes, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend's proposition. Indeed, we have consistently said through the passage of the Employment Rights Bill that actually treating your workforce well, giving them proper support, ensuring security at work is the way for prosperity in this country.
Mr. Strother.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having raised with the Minister the need to do more on paternity and kinship leave in particular, I very much welcome today's statement and the upcoming landmark review. I recently had the pleasure of hosting a number of parents at the Victoria Pub in Hitchin to talk about the challenges caused by the current paternity leave framework. It was particularly heartbreaking to hear one man's story, an expectant father, of the impact it was already starting to have on him. Ahead of his birth, his wife-to-be was a high-risk case, and so he was already having to take significant leave in advance of the birth that he was worried would then deprive his ability to be there in those crucial days after the birth with the family, with his child, with that new mum who desperately would need that support. That cannot be right. So could I invite the Minister to come to Hitchin actually over a pint to speak to local parents about the impact this review could have for cases like this?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He certainly knows how to get me to attend the constituency with the offer of a pint. I will certainly look forward to taking him up on that. And he's raised an important point about medical issues. Obviously, there's been some changes recently in terms of neonatal leave and care, which is, I think, a huge step forward. But in terms of pre-delivery issues, that again is something that I think we ought to discuss further. So I look forward to having that pint and conversation.
Mr. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his statement, the Minister mentioned the very low level of take-up of shared parental leave. Would he agree with me that's partly due to the gap in pay between men and women, and that if we can normalise paternity leave in our society, then we'll help to make sure that both mums and dads have equal pay?
Mr.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I think that is an important point. That is something that I expect we will be examining as part of the call for evidence. I referred to the work that Aviva have done in this area. They clearly have seen a culture shift in their organisation where actually it is completely normal and acceptable. Indeed, it's encouraged for both parents to take their share of leave. That's something I think we can all take lessons from.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome today's long overdue review of parental leave. The UK currently has amongst the lowest paternity leave in Europe, and that's not just a statistic, it's a real life struggle for families up and down this country. Can my honourable friend assure me that the review will not only just look at the amount of leave, but the amount of salary that's provided during it to protect those on the lowest wages in our country, and how he's going to go about ensuring the voice of fathers and campaigning groups like the Dad Shift and trade unions are heard in the review?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point about the financial implications of this measure. Of course, we will engage with all relevant organisations. The cost is important. We have to, of course, balance the objectives we're trying to achieve here with the cost to the Exchequer and to businesses, but that is what the review will be considering in some detail.
Sean Davis.
Well, may I welcome the statement and the launch of the review itself. I recently held a Dad's Drop-In event supported by Dad Shift, and there I heard from dads about examples of excellent employers doing the right thing, but also frustrations amongst self-employed and those who run SMEs about how complex and confusing the system can be. Can the Minister confirm that the voice of business of all sizes and dads will be the heart of this review? But also, can he give a message to his government colleagues that often government departments and organisations lag behind the best of employers in this country?
Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question. Really, this government should be leading the way in these areas, and if there are specific examples where we can do better, I'd be interested to discuss that with colleagues in other departments. He's right to reference the complexity of these issues. One of the things that we've heard is that businesses, particularly small businesses, sometimes struggle to navigate all the paperwork, and that's something that the review will also be considering.
That completes the statement. Presentation of Bill Tim Farron. Not here. We will now go to the 10-minute rule bill. Sean Barry.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to establish the right to breathe clean air, to require the Secretary of State to achieve and maintain clean air in England, to make provision about environmental targets and minimum standards in relation to clean air, to make provision about the powers, duties and functions of public bodies in England in relation to air pollution, to give the Office for Environmental Protection additional powers and duties related to clean air, to require the Secretary of State to comply with the United Nations Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution, to require the Secretary of State and public authorities to apply specified environmental principles in carrying out their duties under this Act, and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, I am very grateful for the chance to present the Clean Air Human Rights Bill alongside cross-party colleagues. This bill is about the right to breathe clean air, the right to grow up and grow old without stunted lungs, without preventable diseases like asthma, and without disabling and potentially lethal harm being done to our lungs, hearts and brains by preventable air pollution. We call this bill Ella's Law because it is also about a little girl, a 9-year-old who made history and whose memory powers this campaign for environmental, social and indeed racial justice. I am very grateful to the many honourable and right honourable members who are here today to hear her story. Ella's mother, Rosamond Adukisi Deborah CBE, is also here in the gallery with Ella's sister and brother Sophia and Robert, and I know that the whole family have many good friends in this house. Ella Roberta Adukisi Deborah had nearly 30 emergency hospital admissions between her first diagnosis of asthma at the age of 6 and her tragic death aged just 9 years on the 15th of February 2013. Throughout her illness, there have been no mention of air pollution being a possible factor in her condition. And on Ella's original death certificate, it simply said she died of acute respiratory failure. Her mother Rosamond did not know why her lively, sporty and talented daughter had become so ill after being such a healthy child. But years after Ella died, Rosamond began to ask questions and push for answers. The family lived close to the heaving South Circular Road in London, one of the busiest main roads in Europe. And with the help of medical and scientific experts like Professor Stephen Holgate, Rosamond began to realise there could be a link between the high air pollution where they lived and the course of Ella's illness. Together they began to ask, was air pollution responsible for Ella developing asthma in the first place? And were high pollution days responsible for triggering the repeated attacks that eventually took her life? Taking new knowledge and evidence, working with legal professionals like Jocelyn Coburn, a long road began to a new inquest and a landmark new death certificate that for the first time in the world cited air pollution. In December 2020, Deputy Coroner Philip Barlow ruled for this change and said that excessive levels of air pollution had made a material contribution to Ella's death. And in his report to prevent future deaths, he recommended that the government should take note that there is no safe level for particulate matter and that World Health Organization guidelines should be seen as minimum requirements. He also said that legally binding targets based on them would reduce the number of deaths from air pollution in the UK, and he highlighted the lack of public awareness and information about daily pollution levels. And that is what this bill would do, set targets in law based on the very latest World Health Organization guidelines and provide a pathway to comply. Ella's illness began in 2010, and it spanned a period where the area around her home experienced some of the highest levels of air pollution, consistent breaches of legal limits, and terrible injustices. In 2010, it should not have had anything like these levels of air pollution. That's because, following intensive work from campaigner and friend of Ella's Law, Simon Birkett, the founder of Clean Air in London, alongside environmental campaigners in Europe, in June 2008, Directive 2008-50 EC from the European Commission had entered into force. This set limit values for annual average nitrogen dioxide concentrations in the air people breathe of 40 micrograms per metre cubed. And those limits should have been met by the 1st of January 2010. It also set the first limit values for small particulates, something that is even more deadly at the smallest particle sizes and much lower concentrations. In the UK, we did not achieve these limits before 2010, when Ella's illness began, or even soon after. Instead, this period was one of delay to clean air zones, deception by diesel car manufacturers, and even a mayor putting glue on the roads next to the air quality monitoring stations on days when legal particulate limits might be breached. This was all a true scandal and a tragedy. I hope the government is very aware that the 2010 limits are still far from being fully reached today in parts of England, and its own projections say that parts of the country will not become compliant until 2029, 2032 or even 2045. And these legal limits were based on the 2005 air quality guidelines from the World Health Organization. In 2021, the WHO halved its guideline for the smallest particulates and slashed its guideline for nitrogen dioxide from 40 micrograms per metre cubed to 10. And a new EU directive entered into force for our neighbours in 2024 in December. Here it is clear we need something new as well. And success is clearly possible. There has been much better action in recent years in some areas, notably in London itself. And a good proportion of this has been due to the influence on the Mayor of London of Rosamond, as well as determined campaigning by groups like Mums for Lungs, the Healthy Air Coalition, Asthma and Lung UK, Clean Air in London, Friends of the Earth, Client Earth, and many others. We are making some progress, but to respect the right to breathe clean air, we must move faster and wider in the transition to clean heating, cleaner transport, and cuts in pollution from aviation, farming, and industry as well. The second best time to do the right thing is always now. On Clean Air Day 2025 last month, with other MPs, I was so pleased to meet doctors and campaigners, including Rosamond, on their walk and wheel to Parliament from Great Ormond Street Hospital. They brought us the very important, very latest medical evidence from the Royal College of Physicians. Its new report to MPs highlights and summarises evidence gained over the last decade, showing that there are now links between air pollution and almost every organ in the body and the diseases that affect them. And it estimates that during 2025, 500 premature deaths per week will be attributable to air pollution, and calculates an economic burden of £27 billion in 2019 due to healthcare costs, productivity losses and reduced quality of life. The report above all highlights how air pollution is a preventable public health threat, and we will have the tools to prevent it in this bill, which brings the nearly 70-year-old Clean Air Act up to date, in line with the excellent blueprint published today by the Healthy Air Coalition. Mr. Speaker, introducing this bill again during this parliamentary term is important. The cross-party proposers want to extend and build upon the efforts of Baroness Jones of Moulscombe and others who helped steer a similar bill through the other place in 2022. And my honourable predecessor in Brighton Pavilion, Caroline Lucas, promoted the same bill in this House after that, right up to the end of the previous Parliament. The ultimate hope of us all is that this government will adopt and back Ella's Law in her memory, adopt its provisions, take up the important actions it will mandate, and recognise in law the human right to breathe clean air as soon as possible. For the other children who still die unnecessarily due to air pollution, for the families who still lose loved ones to dementia, cancer, heart disease, and other things caused and made worse by dirty air, I ask the House for leave to present this bill in that hope.
That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of the other opinions say aye. Aye. The contrary no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Ms Stella Creasy, Belle Rubira Addy, Vera Hobhouse, Shoka Adam, Seamus Logan, Claire Hanna, Afzal Khan, Ellie Chowns, Ruth Jones, Uma Kumaran, Dr Ross Savage and myself, Mr Speaker.
Sean Barry.
Clean Air Human Rights Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 7th of November.
Friday the 7th of November. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill, second reading.
Wait. No. No. The reason amendment in the name of Rachel Maskell has been selected. I now call the Minister, Secretary of State to move the second reading. Please, Kendall.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I beg to move that this bill be read for a second time. This bill and our wider welfare reforms seek to fix the broken benefit system that we inherited from the party opposite and to deliver a better life for millions of people across our country. Our plans are rooted in principles and values I know many in this House share. Compassion for those who need our help most. A belief in equality and social justice, that everyone should have the chance to fulfil their potential no matter where they're born or what their parents did. And responsibility for our constituents and our country as a whole, so we ensure the welfare state is sustainable and lasts for generations to come. But the system we inherited is failing on all these counts. Members opposite left us with a system that incentivises people to define themselves as incapable of work just to be able to afford to live. They then wrote people off without any and 1 in 8 of all our young people not in education, employment or training, with all the terrible long-term consequences this brings for their future job prospects, earnings and health. And the number of people on disability benefits set to more than double this decade, with awards for personal independence payments increasing at twice the rate of increases in the prevalence of disabled people in our society, adding 1,000 new PIP awards a day. That's the equivalent of adding a city the size of Leicester every single year. And I do not believe, let me make some progress, I do not believe that this is sustainable if we want a welfare state that protects people who most need our help for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing compassionate about leaving millions of people who could work without the help they need to build a better life. There's no route to equality or social justice when 9 million of our fellow citizens are out of work and not looking at work for work, and when our country has one of the widest disability employment gaps in Europe. And there is no responsibility in leaving our system of social security to continue as it is and risk support for it becoming so frayed that it is no longer there to provide a safety net for those who can never work and who most need our help and support. So this bill, alongside our wider reforms, will help people who can work to do so, protect those who cannot, and begin to get the benefits bill on a more sustainable footing. Labour's historic mission is to get more people into good jobs, because we know the value of good work, not only as the best route out of poverty and to raising living standards, but because good work brings a sense of purpose, pride and dignity, and because there is such clear evidence that good work is good for physical and mental health too. I'll of course give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way, and she is absolutely right that any government that takes office should aim to reduce poverty in this country. Why then do her own government's figures show that the actions that she is taking this afternoon will put an extra 150,000 people into poverty? And does she really think that is what her backbenchers expected when they were elected to government last year?
I think that's what they call chutzpah, Mr. Speaker, seeing as members opposite put an extra 900,000 children into poverty, and this government is determined to tackle it. This government will take 100,000 children out of poverty by our plans to extend free school meals to every household on universal credit, a down payment on our child poverty strategy in the autumn. Mr. Speaker, I am very proud that at the spending review, alongside billions of extra investment to create good jobs in every part of the country, to invest in the transport infrastructure and skills so people can get those jobs, and to drive down NHS waiting lists so people can get back to health and back to work, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, delivered the biggest ever investment in employment support for sick and disabled people, quadrupling what we inherited from the party opposite to £1 billion a year. And as I set out, I will give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and I thank the Secretary of State for the improvements that she has made to this bill, which are extremely reassuring for my constituents, 9,000 which are on personal independence payments and are now reassured. There are some, however, that are concerned about the impact assessment published yesterday about the number of adults who could be put into poverty. I do recognise that these figures do not take into consideration the impact of the planned record investment in employment support. Will she publish further assessments which provide a more accurate view?
I would thank my honourable friend for her question. She's absolutely right that those figures do not take into any account the employment impact from the investment we are putting in. We have actually produced extremely clear evidence that good employment support works, including Work Choice, a Labour programme ended by the Tories, which meant 40% more disabled people were in work 8 years later, and we will indeed publish further updated impact assessments before committee stage, spelling this out in more detail. I will, of course, give way to the Honourable.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I've been asked by Parkinson's and MS, and I asked this question specifically of the Minister. Hope she give me the answer. They're talking about they will, a fluctuating condition will be locked out of qualifying for the higher rate of the UC health element. The functional limitation must constantly apply for a claimant to meet the severe conditions criteria. Exactly. So can I ask the Secretary of State, please, will she commit on the floor of this House to add explicit reference to the bill to ensure that fluctuating conditions like Parkinson's, like MS, are not locked out at the higher rate? It's really important for those people, if you don't mind. Thanks so much.
The honourable gentleman raises a very important point, and I would say to him that our honourable members have asked about the issue of whether people with fluctuating conditions meet the severe conditions criteria, which is for those with lifelong conditions that will never improve and means they can never work. It is absolutely the case that as someone's condition progresses, if they actually change and meet those severe conditions criteria, they will be protected. And one of the reasons for the TIMS review that I'll come on to later is precisely so we make sure this vital benefit does recognise the impact of fluctuating conditions on people's life. That's absolutely crucial to make sure this benefit is fit for the future. Now, as I set out to the House, I'll make a tiny bit of progress and then I will respond. As I set out to the House yesterday, we have listened carefully to concerns that there wouldn't be enough employment support in place quickly enough by the time the benefit changes come in. So we are bringing forward an additional new £300 million of employment support for sick and disabled people, delivering a total of £600 million next year, £800 million the year after, and £1 billion in 2028-29, increasing our total spending on employment support for sick and disabled people to £3.8 billion over this Parliament. So we ensure that anyone who is affected by this bill will be offered personalised work, health and skills support, including access to a specially trained advisor by the time the legislation comes in. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
The Secretary of State giving way. Under the last government, we brought forward the Work Well pilot, which looked at 15 different areas for 59,000 people to provide a package, a multidisciplinary team package to get them back into work. Am I correct in thinking that the £300 million she's investing is built off the back of that pilot? Are they planning to continue it and continue to grow it? Because the results seem to show that it had a very strong preference of getting people back into work while supporting their health. That's what this House wants to do. Does she agree with me that that's the case, and is that the funding?
Joining up work and health support is absolutely essential, and I've personally been to visit some of the projects in place, and they're making a really big difference. We are building on that with additional extra investment, in quadrupling what we inherited from the party opposite. But joining up work and health support is very, very important, because I think good health and good work are two sides of the same coin, but this needs to be available widely and across the country. Turning now to the specific measures in this bill. Clauses 1 to 4 begin to tackle the perverse incentives left by the party opposite, which encourage people to define themselves as incapable of work by rebalancing the universal credit standard allowance and health top-up. I am very proud that we are delivering the first ever sustained above inflation rise to the universal credit standard allowance. The largest permanent real terms increase in the headline rate of out-of-work benefits since the 1970s. 6.7 million households, the lowest income households, will benefit from the increase in the universal credit standard allowance and deliver a £725 a year increase in cash terms by 29/30 for a single person aged 25 and over. Now, having listened seriously to concerns about our original proposals on the UC health top-up for existing claimants and future claimants with severe conditions and those at the end of their lives, we will ensure that for these groups, the combined value of their universal credit standard allowance and the health top-up will rise at least in line with inflation, protecting their income from these vital benefits in real terms every year for the rest of the Parliament. Alongside these changes, Schedule 1 of the bill will ensure that people with severe lifelong health conditions will never be reassessed, removing all the unnecessary and unacceptable stress and anxiety this brings, and so they have the dignity and security they deserve. And yesterday, we published draft regulations on our new right to try, guaranteeing that in and of itself, work will never lead to a benefit reassessment, giving people the confidence to try work, something many people have called for years. Mr. Speaker, turning now to Clause 5 of the Bill on personal independence payments. Yesterday I told the House that we have listened to the concerns raised by many honourable members, disabled people and their organisations about the impact of the new requirement for existing claimants to score a minimum of 4 points on at least one daily living activity to be eligible for the daily living component. Even though 9 out of 10 people claiming PIP at the point these changes come in would be unaffected by the end of the Parliament, I know this has caused deep and widespread anxiety and stress. So we have changed our original proposals. So the new 4-point eligibility requirement will only apply to new claims from November 2026. This means no existing claimants will lose PIP because of the changes brought forward in this bill, and anyone who currently receives any passported benefits, such as care allowance, will also be unaffected by this change. I will, of course,
my right honourable friend for giving way, and the changes to PIP as far as they go are very welcome, as is the review to be conducted by our right honourable friend, the Work and Pensions Minister. And that will be in co-production with disability groups, as I understand it. Can I just ask, however, why do we have a review when it's committed to make changes in November 2026, when that review may not have been completed? Wouldn't it be far more logical to have the review, to produce it, to bring it this House for agreement, and then to make the changes after that?
I will come on to this point in a moment, but the purpose of the PIP review is to have a wider look at the assessment. It hasn't been looked at for over a decade since it came in. I understand the sequencing points, but I'll come on to that in a moment. What I think is extremely important is to have the very clear message that existing claimants, PIP claimants, will now be unaffected by the changes in this bill, and I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to her for giving way and for the fact that she's listened this week. But she will know there are many disabled people watching our proceedings today who remain very worried. She's absolutely right about the fact that the existing system isn't working. So can she say more about the review that our honourable friend from East Ham is going to do, and how we can rebuild the confidence of the disabled groups and those people who are worried, because every welfare reform seems to have been bad for them, about the fact we can have a system that actually assesses who really needs it.
My honourable friend makes an extremely important point, and I'll come on to say a little bit more about this in a moment, but this review will be co-produced with disabled people, their organisations, clinicians, other experts and MPs, because we need to make sure that we get this right. I have been a long-standing champion of co-production, including when I was the Shadow Minister for Social Care, because I think you get those best decisions when you work closely with people. Let me just say a bit more about this, because there are issues that many honourable friends raised, including yesterday. We believe protecting existing claimants while ensuring new PIP awards are focused on those with higher needs in future strikes the right and fair balance going forward. And I want to address some of the questions raised yesterday by honourable members on this side of the House about the sequencing of the PIP changes and the wider review of the PIP assessment being led by my right honourable friend, the Minister for Social Security and Disability. I will make progress on this point. No existing PIP claimant will be affected by the changes in this bill. They will also be reassessed under the existing rules whenever they have an award review. From November 2026, new claimants will be assessed under the 4-point criteria. The purpose of the TIMS review is to look at the PIP assessment as a whole, to ensure it is fair and fit for the future. And so it takes account of the huge changes in society, the world of work, and the nature of health conditions and disability since the benefit was first introduced more than a decade ago. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I welcome the improvements made to this bill so far. However, I still think we do need more details about the co-productive element of the TIMS review. So can my right honourable friend confirm to me, can my right honourable friend refer to me that the review will guarantee that disabled people and their organisations are the key voice in developing this policy? And will it change and revolutionise the view in Whitehall so that future policies around disabled people that impact them will always have their voices central to the discussion?
I can absolutely reassure my honourable friend on this point. Many honourable members have asked for precise details about how this will work. That is something I think it is extremely important for us, and we're beginning that process, to discuss with disabled people, their organisations and other experts, because it isn't for me, it is not for me. If you just let me finish my sentence, and then I will of course give way to the honourable lady. It's really important that we don't come up with a process. I think it would be completely wrong if we come up with a process in Whitehall and impose it on other people. You've got to do that properly. I'll give way to the honourable lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the government taken legal advice as to whether it is lawful to treat people with the same conditions, disabilities and circumstances differently within the benefit system? It is morally unacceptable, but does the Minister believe it is lawful?
I would gently just remind the honourable lady that her own party had different rules and different rates for people on existing compared to new benefits in future. That's something they did. Once again, members opposite seem to be railing at the very problems that they caused. Now, I understand why many members would like to see the results from the TIMS review implemented before the 4-point change takes effect. But reviewing the assessment as a whole, let me just say, it is a major undertaking that will take time to get right, especially if we co-produce it properly. It will be for those involved in the review to determine the precise table, but we are absolutely committed to moving quickly and completing the review by next autumn. And I want to assure the House any changes following the TIMS review will be implemented as soon as is practically possible via primary or secondary legislation. And once we have implemented changes from the review, any existing PIP claimant can ask for a reassessment. Mr. Speaker, welfare reform, let's be honest, is never easy, perhaps especially for Labour governments. Our social security system directly touches the lives of millions of people, and it is something we all care deeply about. We have listened to the concerns that have been raised to help us get these changes right. The bill protects people already claiming PIP. It protects, in real terms, the incomes of people already receiving the UC Health top-up from that benefit and their standard allowance. And it protects those with severe, lifelong conditions who will never work, and those near the end of their life, as we promised we would. But I have to tell the House, unlike the previous administration, this government must not and will not duck the big challenges facing this country. Because the people we are in politics to serve deserve so much better than this. We are taking action to put the social security system on a sustainable footing so it is there for generations to come. We're helping millions of low-income households across the country by increasing the standard rate of universal credit, and because we know there is no route to social justice based on increased benefit spending alone, we are providing record investment in employment support for sick and disabled people so they have the same rights and chances to work as anybody else. Our plans will create a fairer society, one where people who can work get the help they need, where we protect those who cannot. A society where the welfare safety net actually survives and is always there for those who need it. Above all, this government is determined to give people hope that tomorrow will be better than today, with real opportunities for everyone to fulfil their potential and build a better life, and I commend this legislation to the House.
The question is that the bill now be read a second time. Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bernal.
Mr. Speaker, we are staring down the barrel of a crisis that no serious government can ignore. The welfare system no longer works as it should. What was once a safety net has become a trap. A system designed to protect the most vulnerable is now encouraging dependency and dragging this country into deeper debt. Mr. Speaker, the welfare system is a crucial safety net for the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society. So I was quite surprised, Mr. Speaker, at the tone that the Secretary of State decided to take today. She thinks that she can stand there and get away with the fiction that all of this was caused by the last government. So let me refresh their memories, especially for those who were not here at the time. In 2010, we inherited 8% unemployment, and we brought it right down. The last Conservative government reformed welfare to introduce universal credit, and our reforms helped ensure that employment more than halved and was at a near record low. What have we seen since they came in? Unemployment has risen every single month that Labour came into office. Mr. Speaker, during our time, indeed 800 jobs were created for every day that we were in office. And at the same time, until the COVID pandemic, we kept spending under control, cutting the deficit every year. But COVID changed everything. It did. Now we face a new... Mr. Speaker, it is delightful to hear them laughing. I remember us sitting on that side of the House and they were demanding that we spend more and more and more money. Thank God it was Conservatives who were there under COVID. Labour would have bankrupted the country. We face, Mr. Speaker, we face a new reality. Under this government, every single working day, 3,000 people move on to incapacity benefits. 3,000 every single day. That is a 50% increase from when we left office. A 50% increase. They have only been in power 1 year, Mr. Speaker. Imagine what it's going to be like after the next 4 years. A 50% increase, 3,000 people onto incapacity benefits every day. That is not normal. It is not sustainable, and it is not acceptable. Spending is spiraling under Labour, Mr. Speaker.
Will my right honourable friend give way?
Yes, I will.
Edward Lee.
My right honourable friend quite rightly mentions COVID, and I'm sure there's one thing that we can agree on. Unfortunately, before COVID, people were assessed much more often in person. And during COVID, that was stopped, understandably. And we have to get these in-person assessments going. And we have to get them going quickly. Sure, that's something we can all agree on.
The Father of the House is absolutely right. This is something that we should all be able to agree on. But they're too busy trying to shift the blame instead of solving the problem. Let's talk about solving the problem, Mr. Speaker. We have 28 million working people propping up 28 million people not working. The rider is getting heavier than the horse. Health and disability benefits were £40 billion before COVID. By 2030, I'll give way in a moment, by 2030, on this government spending plans, they will hit £100 billion. I give way to the right honourable lady.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady. I wonder if she could help the House. When was it, during the 14 years when the Conservatives were in power, was the time when the benefit system worked well?
Mr. Speaker, I will remind her of our inheritance. We took difficult... I will. In 2010, I said it before, I'll say it again, 8% unemployment down to 4%. Every single time Labour leaves office, they leave more people unemployed. The welfare system needs continual reform. We took difficult decisions and got universal credit through with so much opposition from them. We improved the system. That doesn't mean it can't be further improved, and we've offered to help. They don't want any help, they just want to make things worse. Mr. Speaker, by 2030, on this government spending plans, we will hit £100 billion on health and disability benefits alone. That is more than what we spend on defence. And this should make everyone in this House stop and think, because this bill does nothing to fix that problem, and that is why we cannot support it. The Conservative Party are the only party in this House urging restraint. And unless this House acts, they will bankrupt our children. They will bury the next generation under a mountain of borrowing and debt, and they will do it not because we had no choice, but because they lacked the courage to choose. A fundamental and serious programme to reform our welfare system is required, and this bill is not it. This bill is a fudge. And I feel sorry for the Right Honourable Lady. She looks as if she's being tortured. This is a rushed attempt to plug. We all know why this is happening. We all know why this is happening. I'll give way in a moment. We all know why this is happening. This is a rushed attempt to plug the Chancellor's fiscal hole. It is driven not by principle, but by panic. The changes were forced through not because they get more people into work, but because someone in 11 Downing Street made a mistake. It is clear that these changes were not designed to introduce fundamental reforms. How did we get here? Last year, at the Chancellor's first budget, she left herself no headroom. That same budget killed growth, meaning that unemployment has increased every month since Labour took office. This is a good time for me to remind the House again that every time Labour leave office, they do so with unemployment higher than when they came in. And they are doing it again. They are doing it again. I'll give way to the Right Honourable Gentleman first.
I'm very grateful for her giving way. I'm sure that she would not want an inaccurate statement to stand on the record. Unemployment fell under just two 20th century governments, the first Labour government and the 1970 government of Ted Heath. Now, I know that she's repeating a standard Conservative Party message, but it is a really cynical and silly misuse of statistics.
The Honourable Gentleman is simply wrong. He needs to get an education and look at the facts. I give way to my Right Honourable friend.
My Right Honourable friend agree with me that the chief architect of the fiasco which people with disabilities are facing today, and which every member of the Labour Party opposite is facing today, the chief architect is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the fact that she is not here to face up and take responsibility is all we need to know about her and those on the front bench opposite.
My Right Honourable friend is quite right. This is a fiasco, and it is the Chancellor's fault. She marches them up and down the hill all the time. They're the ones who have to face their constituents. We are trying to help get a welfare system under control and get people into work. Yes. And my Right Honourable friend, he is right to raise the Chancellor. He's right to raise the Chancellor because when that economic outlook worsened this spring, she chose to force through these changes to welfare, designed not to reform, not to improve the system, but to address a hole in her numbers. These changes were rushed for Rachel, as we say, Mr. Speaker. And I watched when she made that budget. It was quite clear she had no idea of the consequences of her decision. But the country should not have to pay for the mess she has made, and neither should disabled people. Even with these changes in this bill, welfare spending would still be billions higher at the end of the Parliament. Slowing down how much you increase spending is not a cut. And despite I'll give way on that point.
I thank her for giving way. I don't know about the rest of the House, but I'm slightly baffled here. The opposition has made a virtue of her blank slate and her blank sheet of paper. But is she in favour of more or less? Is she in favour of the actions of her government or not? Because this complete lack of taking responsibility is exactly what got us into this mess in the first place.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised he's baffled because he's clearly not listening to what I'm saying. We have been very, very clear. We had 3 conditions. We've been very, very clear that we want to see the welfare budget come down. But I'll make some progress. Even with these changes in this bill, Mr. Speaker, welfare spending is still going to be higher by billions at the end of this Parliament. This is not a cut. Slowing down an increase is not a cut. We need to get this under control. But despite the obvious, I will make some progress. Despite the obvious flaws in this bill, Mr. Speaker, we offered to support benefit changes in the national interest. The honourable gentleman asked a question. I will answer it very clearly here for those who have not been paying attention. We agreed to support the government if they could make 3 simple commitments, not unachievable or unreasonable commitments. That first, they had to cut the overall welfare bill because we are spending far too much already. Second, if they would get more people into work. And third, if they would stand by the Chancellor's own commitment, her own commitment, that with taxes at a record level, because of her choices, she wouldn't be coming back for more tax rises. What did we get from the government? A sneery response indicating that they could manage on their own. How's that going? And what happened instead was that the number of MPs opposed to this bill grew ever larger until the inevitable U-turn finally came. Announced by press release dispatched after midnight, a panic letter setting out that the reforms had been gutted, and now the bill is more incoherent than it was at the beginning. I give way.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. Just to reflect on the record of the previous government. As of 2024, approximately 24% of the UK population, nearly 16 million people, were living in poverty. Between 2019 to 22-23, an additional 2.1 million people were living in poverty. And in the year until April 2024, before the Labour government came into power, 4.45 million, or 31% of children in the UK, were living in relative poverty. Will the Right Honourable Lady agree with me that the previous Tory government failed the majority of the population, including disabled people and children?
No, I definitely will not agree with him. He's talking about relative poverty figures, and the fact is the best way to get people out of poverty is into work, something we did again and again and again. Mr. Speaker, the bill is more incoherent now than it was right at the beginning. It doesn't do the job at all. Reforms, which were not enough in the first place, will only now cut £2 billion from a ballooning budget instead of £5 billion. And they will create a new welfare trap and a 2-tier welfare system. Right up until the last moment, the government kept pushing and pushing, ruling out changes, sending their poor, weary ministers and ambitious backbench bootlickers out onto the airwaves. And then, as we have seen before, Mr. Speaker, at the last moment, I say to them, they abandon you. They abandon you after all of that. They have been hung out to dry, Mr. Speaker. The government does not care how it has made their backbenchers look. And it's not the first time. Week after week, the Right Honourable Lady was sent here to say with a straight face that she was right to cut the winter fuel payments, that there would be no turning back, that the country's finances would simply collapse if she didn't take pensioners' fuel money and give it to the trade unions. And her backbenchers sucked that one up. They muttered and they grumbled, but each of them went back and told their constituents that the winter fuel payments were being confiscated to fix the foundations. And only once pensioners had sat in the cold all winter and the Chancellor had tanked the economy and up and down the country Labour MPs had the door slammed in their face did they finally accept that it was a mistake. This time, when asked to line up behind a bill that cuts money from older disabled people with physical disabilities, a bill that according to their own modelling gets no one into work, funnily enough, lots of them didn't fancy another go. Perhaps they will think twice next time the Chancellor comes to them with a bad idea. Yes, I will give it.
I thank the Leader of the Opposition for giving way. The Prime Minister's inability to control his backbenchers has meant that the Chancellor now has to find an extra £2.5 billion to fill the spending and savings that she's claiming she's got. Can the Leader of the Opposition guess how she might raise that money?
The fact, I thank my honourable friend for that question, the fact that they've refused not to commit to tax rises means that it's probably inevitable. But it is quite clear that Labour MPs will surely feel emboldened to push for more unaffordable changes to our welfare system, including to the two-child benefit cap. So let's be clear. Part of the reason these plans have been so rushed and badly thought through is because of the mess the Chancellor has made. This is an attempt to find the quickest and crudest savings possible, to plug the hole she has created in the public finances, but the Chancellor is not the only one to blame. It beggars belief that the Labour Party came into office after 14 years in opposition with absolutely no serious plan for reforming welfare. What were they doing all that time? What were they doing? The welfare bill is already totally unsustainable, and it is only getting worse, Mr. Speaker. It is only getting worse. As I said, health and... I'll give way to the Honourable...
and as one of the Labour backbenchers who will be supporting the government, can I just point out there's not that many backbenchers behind her, and they get fewer every week. But perhaps, given what she's just said, she could tell us. She says she wants to cut further from the budget of the DWP.
Where?
What would she cut? What exactly would she do?
We cut unemployment. Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, health and disability benefits are forecast to rise to £100 billion. That will mean £1 in every £4 raised in income tax will be paying for these benefits. This is not sustainable. Until the pandemic, we on this side of the House had spent years bringing down the benefits bill and getting people back into work, including millions of disabled people. Talent, energy, ingenuity, these are not confined to those in perfect health. If we want to afford public services, improve people's lives and compete globally, we cannot consign so many people to a life out of work. We've got to get them into work. So I do believe that the whole House agrees the system needs change. I think we may disagree on what exactly that change looks like, but what we have in front of us today is just a big mess. I give way to my right honourable
friend. The Secretary of State was right. Welfare reform is tough, and governments tend to duck the issue, with notable exceptions like my friend for Shringford and Woodford. But if you are going to change welfare radically, you surely review the options and then decide which ones to take. By contrast, this government's decided on its option and is then going to review to think what it might have done. Surely that's not the right way to run welfare or any part of government.
Spot on, John. My right honourable friend makes an excellent point. I have nothing further to add. He said it just as well as it possibly could have been said. So, Mr. Speaker, the whole House agreed that the system needs to change one way or another, but what we have in front of us today is a big mess. It's neither fish nor fowl. And because of their hasty concessions, we now have a two-tier benefit system, under which people already on benefits will be incentivized to keep them. And there are other issues. Why, for instance, should someone diagnosed with Parkinson's after November 2026 receive a lower payment than someone diagnosed a month prior? We need to fix a whole load of problems. For instance, we need to filter out people who are gaming the system. We need to redesign the system so that genuinely disabled people do not find it so Kafkaesque. And we need a fundamental rethink about who we can afford to support and why. 1 in 4 people in this country, Mr. Speaker, now self-report as disabled. This is an extraordinary state of affairs. We clearly cannot afford to support all of them. We should focus that support on those with the greatest need. Many people with disabilities live full and independent lives, contributing to society. Research published by the Centre for Social Justice last week shows that you could save up to £9 billion by restricting benefits for lower-level mental health challenges such as anxiety. So members opposite ask what we would change. That's one of the things we would change. And findings published by the Taxpayers Alliance today shows that people with conditions that include acne and food intolerance are getting benefits and getting entitlements like Motability. We already know that the impact assessments for this bill show that it will get no one into work. Those are not my impact assessments, those are their impact assessments, so the government should think again, and we will support them to do so. We support replacing remote or online assessments for claimants with face-to-face assessments. That simple change alone could dramatically reduce the number of new claimants. And before the last election, we outlined reforms that the new government rejected out of hand. Will the Secretary of State return to them? Because these changes we are discussing today are rushed and confused. And rather than the fundamental reforms which we so badly need, we have been presented with a botched package of changes, watered down and carved apart in the face of backbench pressure. There is no way we can back this. So instead of allowing her backbenchers to dictate her policy, the Secretary of State should go back to the drawing board, cut the overall bill, get people into work and eliminate the need for new tax rises. That's a programme that we will support in the national interest.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to put on record my thanks to you for selecting the reasoned amendment in my name and that of others, but most importantly, of 138 deaf and disabled people's organisations who backed that, who co-produced it and worked alongside. It's about time we all recognise the ableism within our systems, which has made them feel so far away from policy making. And I am glad that my honourable friend will be looking at changing that, and I trust once and for all. But on these big decisions, it's so important that they are involved too. My constituent sat in front of me with his gorgeous little girl, thankfully with headphones on and playing a kiddie's game. He said he wouldn't get through this. He just about manages now. Some days he gets up, others not. As his mental health is failing, he can't work. Everything else has been taken from him. And now, this little bit of funding to help them get by, to give him just 1 ounce of dignity, was more than he could bear. Then the words came. It would be better that I wasn't here. That was also his expectation. He tried before. He'll be safe now, but the one who follows not. Another felt dehumanised as they would lose their independence to shower and dress. And others could not balance the books as Scope's disability price tag is at $1,095 every month of extra cost. Changes that would switch independence to dependence on social care, food banks, pleading for emergency funds or seeking charity. And those who came to see me with fluctuating conditions just do not know where their future lies. These Dickensian cuts belong to a different era and a different party. They are far from what this Labour Party is for, a party to protect the poor, as is my purpose. For I am my brother's keeper. These are my constituents, my neighbours, my community, my responsibility, and I cannot cross by on the other side. For one, let alone for the 150,000 who will be pushed further into poverty. And as so many of us fear, and as the evidence shows, since 600 people took their lives under the Tories' brutal reforms, the tragedy of this ideology could be worse. So I will fight for the purpose of politics, for their livelihoods and their lives. It is a matter of conscience, deep conscience for me, to ensure that these precious people are treated for once with dignity, so they matter for being and not just doing. 16 million, they beg, in the chaos and confusion, where the sequence of consultations makes no sense to them or no sense to me, and I think, if we're honest, no sense to any of us in this bill, to just stop and start again with listening to their voices. So at this 11th hour, I plead withdrawal. We will be met with relief and praise. Let's consult, co-produce, incorporate the Mayfield Review findings and accommodate those of the Timms Review first. Let the voices of older women whose physical health is declining as they work into later life come to the fore, or disabled victims of domestic violence. As Refuge says, the charity will not be able to leave to find their place of safety without PIP. be heard. The olive branch of grace to current claimants gives no mercy to those to come. Disabled people have fought all their lives not to pull up the ladder behind them. We are talking about 430 people on PIP, losing 4,500. 730,000 on universal credit, 3,000, and pushing 150,000 people into deeper poverty. There is a reason why we are a dystopian state of excessive wealth and abject poverty. It is because governments focus on what they value most. And for these people, they never get the attention. It pressures services, it shortens lives, and it breaks societies when people are left behind. I'm happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and I'm proud to put my name to her reasoned amendment today. Do you agree with me that we have a decision to make in this House today, where we stand alongside some of the most vulnerable, people who feel that politics cannot deliver for them, and surely we have a moral duty today to stand with those people and do exactly what she was saying and stop for pause and show them that we care right across this House.
So powerful. And what I would urge all my colleagues is to take with you today the stories that you all know of your constituents. You are here because of them, and they expect you today to serve them in this very difficult vote. And I have to say I find it really hard myself, because I've known the right honourable member for 30 years and I know he comes from a good place, but this is just wrong. So I do believe the honourable member is absolutely right, because if we can afford not to have a wealth tax, not to equalise capital gains or draw on the excess profits of corporate greed, then we can afford a PIP for a disabled person. We must clear the waiting list, of course, prevent people falling out of work, get physio to the injured, hold employers to account for their failings, make them open their doors. And of course, in an assessment, we need to ensure that we're not just looking at what somebody can't do, but enable them to be empowered as to what they can, optimising health and opportunity, take a public health approach, social prescribing and advancing adaptive technology. But I say to the Minister, why not have a bridge between what we have now and where we are heading at the end of this process, so nobody falls through the net? But when disabled people manage discomfort and despair, pain and prejudice, are isolated and lonely, or life has spiralled out of control, don't we believe that they would want for anything else but for it to be this way? Already discriminated and dehumanised, I plead, do not leave desperate. There is a heavy duty on us all, and it starts with compassion and kindness, safety and support. Disabled people want reform, but not by this broken bill. My vote weighs heavy, as this is a matter of deep conscience for me, and it should be and will be for us all. And as Nelson Mandela said, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears.
For clarity, is the honourable member moving her amendment?
Yes.
Okay. The original question was that the bill now be read a second time, since when an amendment has been proposed, as on the order paper. The question is the amendment be made. I'm now going to come to Steve Darling, but just to say to everyone, we will be imposing a 6-minute limit after Steve Darling, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson. Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to particularly associate myself to the speech just made by the member for York Central, and the Liberal Democrats will be supporting the reasoned amendment that is now under debate. Over the last few weeks, we have had the Green Paper under debate, and it has been disturbing to me in the extreme some of the comments coming from the Labour High Command around noises off. around some of the comments from Labour backbenchers. People who really should know better within the leadership of the Labour Party describing PIP as pocket money for people is utterly shameful. It is equally shameful the way that this bill is being dashed through. It decreases the credibility of ministers the way that this bill is being dashed through, because if it is fine, then it should have appropriate levels of scrutiny. But we all know that rushed bills are poor bills, and there it is that law of unintended consequences that will come to haunt this government if this bill goes through. It's already been alluded to, this two-tier approach to this system is wrong, and the Liberal Democrats have grave concerns that this is un-British. It's unjust, and it is not the way of our world. We've heard from the Minister saying, oh, it's been done before, it's done before, but that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it right. It is almost Orwellian that we will be having a system where in our law we say that all disabled people are equal, but some are more equal than others. And also, I'm happy to give way.
The Liberal Democrat Conservative coalition establishing PIP and abolishing disability living allowance, which of course left, I think the Leader of the Opposition's example is someone with Parkinson's. Someone with Parkinson's over 65 could be on DLA, could be on PIP, and could be on attendance allowance. Is he saying he regrets that decision, or that should not exist?
I'd like to thank the member for his contribution. It's always good value. May I also reflect to the Chamber the fact that what message does this send to disabled children? The fact that what we will be saying to those who have gone down the path of the that PIP is often a passport to other levels of support, whether that is blue badges or whether it is rail cards, which gives people the opportunity of getting out and living their best lives. But perhaps the most important passport benefit that you get from this is carers allowance. We have grave concerns of the impact this will have on those families, particularly in the future where they will no longer benefit from carers allowance, which will be robbing those families of around up to £12,000 a year. Don't get me wrong, we as Liberal Democrats recognise that the benefit system is broken and does need resolving, but it needs that, as we had in our manifesto, co-design with disabled groups and carers groups to make sure that we get it right for our people. I'm happy to give way to the...
Thank the Honourable Member for giving way. The Secretary of State today has made the claim that she is listening. Would the Honourable Member agree with me that she's certainly not listening to many of her backbenchers, but also to the 86 disability charities who have said this will harm disabled people? We all know that reform is needed, but today when we talk about reform, there's absolutely no mention of the fraud that goes on within the system that's costing billions to our country. So surely we should start with that and not impact and affect the most vulnerable in our society, and therefore we will be voting against this bill today for that reason.
Thank you. And I concur most with what the member was stating there, but I'd go back to the root causes as some of the challenges of why some people aren't in work, and it goes back to my surgery in Torbay, where people have come along and said, I've got this long-term illness, but I can't be fixed by the NHS, that it's been broken. And until we've sorted our National Health Service and the social care system out, people will be trapped with long-term ill health. So that needs resolving as a matter of urgency. I'd also highlight, and I've banged on about this, and whilst we acknowledge PIP is not there for, it isn't an out-of-work benefit, it helps people live what many of us would take for granted as their lives, but the reality is the access to work scheme is broken massively, and that needs resolving. And whilst there are warm words, happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. I would just like to remind the Honourable Gentleman that the access to work scheme may well be broken. There is measures in this bill and in the Green paper of Pathways to Work which specifically talks about how we should improve the access to work for our constituents, many of whom rely on that as a way of them becoming a fully able person to be able to work themselves. So if the Honourable Gentleman votes against this bill, the risk is that goes too.
Thank you, and I would thank my honourable colleague for their comment, but I would say the access to work system has been here for years and it continues to be broken. It could be easily fixed by the government, but they're choosing not to roll their sleeves up and actually engage with sorting it now, because I've had constituents contact me who've almost lost their jobs because of what is going on here and now. So also we need to see the carers allowance review coming to answer. So there are lots of the jigsaw that needs to be in place before we push forward with these proposals. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I would highlight that it is a broken system. We shouldn't be pushing forward with these proposals until we've heard from that Tim's review. We should not be abandoning some of the most vulnerable in our society. Liberal Democrats will be voting with the reasoned amendment. If that is lost, we will vote against the second amendment. But you do not help those who are already broken by breaking a system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair of the Select Committee, Debbie Abrahams. Thank you so much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the gentleman from the member for Totnes and my fellow Select Torbay, I do apologise, Torbay, and my fellow Select Committee members as well. I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, about the need and the general recognition, I think, is across this House of the need to reform the social security system. For me, the social security system, like our NHS, should be there for any one of us in our time of need, whether that's as a result of being in low-paid work or not in work at all, protecting us from poverty and destitution, which unfortunately it didn't do in the past under the past government. And similarly, if we become sick or disabled or can no longer work, it should be there for us. I believe that the vast majority of people of working age want to work and do the right thing by their families. And as the Work and Pensions Select Committee heard, there's no evidence to suggest otherwise. We have just completed our Pathways to Work inquiry. The Leader of the Opposition, who I think was the Minister for Equalities under the last government, didn't mention, for example, the Equality and Human Rights Commission inquiry, which was then increased to an investigation for their potential discrimination of disabled people. And that was specifically the Department for Work and Pensions, and that is still outstanding. And she didn't mention the United Nations Committee for the Rights of Disabled People investigating the previous government for breaches in the UN CRPD, not once, twice. So it is a little bit rich hearing what the Leader of the Opposition said. For the last 15 years, we have seen a punitive, even a dehumanising social security system where not being able to work has been viewed with suspicion or worse, and that's had devastating consequences. As my friend, the member for York Inner, has mentioned. Central, thank you. Too many people relying on social security support to survive have died through suicide, starvation, and other circumstances exacerbated by their poverty. We know that there have been 10 prevention of future deaths report since 2010 under the previous administration issued by coroners because of direct causal responsibility of the DWP. We don't even know the full extent of these claimants' deaths or even the harms, but my committee published our Safeguarding Vulnerable Claimants report in May, which defined recommendations to prevent these harms to claimants, and this has been at the forefront of my mind when considering the bill. Here I want to start by acknowledging some of the real positive measures in the Pathways to Work Green Paper and the Get Britain Working White Paper, which I believe will have a significant and positive impact on people's lives, helping them to get into work. The reform of job centres and the merger with the National Career Service, the right to try and the new regulations just announced, the Trailblazer programme, which will increase the opportunity for people to get closer to the labour market by working with community groups, the voluntary sector and our health bodies as well. Connect to Work, providing employment support. And very essentially, Keep Britain Working, the independent review that Charlie Mayfield is undertaking and how that will reduce the appalling disability employment gap. Again, not improved on by the government, by the opposition. Still remaining at 28, 29% or thereabouts for 15 years that they were in power. And the commitment, and this is really important, the commitment to safeguarding, which is one of the key measures within the Green Paper. And of course, there's the other work that the government is undertaking in other departments, increasing NHS capacity to ensure that, for example, the hip or knee replacements or mental health support is available in weeks, as it was when I was an NHS chair under the former Labour government as well. In weeks we were dealing with these things, not the years that people are having to wait now. The Employment's Right Bill, the Industrial Strategy, and I could go on. However, the bill, as it is currently planned, risks undermining some of these excellent initiatives. I will, thank you.
Lady giving way, and I know she's always fair-minded in this chamber and outside. She'll recognise that 2.5, possibly as many as 3 million additional disabled people entered the workforce under the last Conservative government. Does she share my concerns that the bill today could actually undermine the ability of people with disabilities to enter the labour market?
I think that's what we've got to make sure doesn't happen. Okay, and there are risks, and I'm being very honest about that. As the evidence that my committee has received as part of our Pathways to Work inquiry, we are an ageing society with worse health than other advanced economies as a result of the austerity policies of the previous government, including the cuts in support to working age people. There's a really good report, 28 reports, so pre-pandemic. If we increased the health of the worst health areas in the country, we will be increasing our productivity by over 13 billion. So we need to make sure that we look at that in the round. And of course, this was very quickly. Is that next round?
Making and health support being redirected towards more deprived areas. That's exactly the announcement that the Secretary of State for Health made just last week. So does she welcome that and think that that will aid in support and improving the health outcomes of people in deprived areas?
Following, I haven't yet seen details of that, but that was something that I raised. And we see the funding following, as we know there was. I'm going to very quickly march on, if I may. And we know that COVID exacerbated these issues. Yeah. The mental health crisis we have in the UK, especially with our young people. The UK Millennium Cohort Study shows the key drivers of the NEETs levels are because of the poverty and the austerity and other issues that families have faced. But back to the bill, very, very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker. I acknowledge and thank the government for the concession that they have made to date, protecting existing PIP claimants and people on UC LCWRA with severe conditions or terminal diagnosis. The growing evidence of the potential harms that would have been experienced was significant. It was the right thing to do. However, people who are newly disabled or who acquire a health condition from November 26 will also need help with their extra costs. NEF has estimated that 150,000 people will be pushed into poverty as a result of no longer being eligible for PIP. No, I'm sorry, I'm not. They're not going to give me an extra minute, unfortunately. And that will in itself worsen their condition. So it'll make it easier for people to live independently if people get live independently, including to work, if they get that money. There is still clear confusion about the PIP review. Will it be co-produced with disabled people in our organisations? If so, why are we saying that the outcome of that review and the new PIP assessment is predetermined at 4 points? And therein lies the problem. Most of us are aware that the dog's breakfast of this bill is being driven by the need to get 4 points to the OBR to enable it to be scored for the budget. The Bank of England governor has said we have to stop over-interpreting the OBR's forecast, which, as we know, are fallible. I'm going to march on to the rice thing. I urge the government to remove the reference to 4 points in clause 4. There are amendments I think we can do, but the commitment to the co-production, the new PIP assessment on the face of the bill, including the new, and to delay the implementation of the freezing of the UC LCWRI. Thank you so much. Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a delight to speak in this debate, and I want to speak in this debate from a lived experience. So I just want to put on record that at one stage after I was shot in the military, when I left, I was received a war pension, and after having some of my foot amputated this year, I'm undergoing reassessment for that process. I also at one stage in my life was diagnosed with complex PTSD and suffered for about 15 years of extreme mental health, which I have openly shared in this chamber. So I understand how people can have unforeseen circumstances that can impact them. I saw this early from a young age growing up when my dad died and left my mum and me and my two brothers on our own with literally nothing. We had a roof over our head and I watched my mum go without food to put food on our table. And I spoke to my mum at the weekend, and the support and the welfare support she had at that time was a lifeline. She couldn't possibly see a way through it if we hadn't have had it. I grew up on free school meals, understanding that the system supported us and allowed us to get through what was a very challenging childhood, but I was brought up in a loving environment. So I've also seen later in life, I lost a business and found that there was a situation where I couldn't put food on my children's table, and had support through what was a challenging time, and did everything I could to work my way out of that and get back on my own 2 feet. But I firmly believe as a Conservative that there should be support for people when they need it, because you never know what you're going to face, and the support should be there at the time when they do require it. What I do believe that welfare is not an option for people to take where they don't want to work, and I've seen it many times of multi-generational unemployment where families create benefits. It's a career. They grow up having seen many years of people in welfare, and they do everything they can to stay. I've seen it on my surgeries where they come and say, I can normally cheat the system, but I'm struggling here. I've had people openly admit that. That isn't everybody. As I said, the system needs to be there for people that do need it. But at the moment, there is a lot of people that don't need it, in my firm view. It should always provide an incentive for people to return to work where it is possible. I understand there will be some people that will never be able to be in a situation of work, and we should support them there. And the government figures this year in April stated that 46.5 billion in 2019-2020 was the total cost of health-related benefits, which has risen to 75 billion in this year just gone, and is expected to rise to 97.7 billion by 29 to 30. On this trajectory, that will have doubled in almost a decade. And the OBR predicts that the government's welfare reforms will still increase costs by 5.3%, while we've got a 1.6% GDP expected growth. So I know the Secretary of State agrees that welfare needs reforming, because on the 19th of July she sent a dear colleague letter explaining a system that they believe was right. We then received one on the 26th of June saying the system's different and the system's changed. In the space of a week, if the Secretary of State has had to change her mind to her approach, how can we believe that that system and the one putting forward now is right? I don't believe that. And it's not a serious attempt of reforming welfare, and I'll back that comment up. So we've talked about the social security system. So the government forecast this current year, 25 to 26, of social security system cost is £316 billion. Today we are discussing something that doesn't do 1% or it's about 1% reform to that cost. That is not reform. That is tinkering around the edges. And I know we'll hear many different on the debate today. Yes, I will.
Very grateful, my honourable friend, for giving way. Would you agree with me that given the rather botched nature which the government have dealt with this, and the U-turn which is proving to be unsatisfactory, given the scale of the changes which need to be made, the government will just move away from any meaningful reform, deeming it to be too difficult or too hot to handle? That does no service to those who are in receipt of benefits, and certainly no benefit to taxpayers.
I think the honourable gentleman is right in that. The government have a huge majority, and they have a chance to reform welfare. And if they don't take it at this moment, it will not get reformed. And I believe pausing this would probably get support of many people across the House, going back, looking at assessment process that can actually look at who requires it and who doesn't, plan that system out before then looking at implementing this, to do a multi-staged approach. And I do respect the Minister and looking forward to the Tim's review, but we might as well make you the chair of the Select Committee as well. It's like marking your own homework on this. And we need to have a fair approach to take that forward, and this system isn't the one that's doing it. And I believe in welfare, and I'm proud that we have welfare and have been the receipt of good welfare system, that we have welfare to support the people that need it. It must be affordable, it must be sustainable, and where possible should put people back into work. And I don't believe any of these changes are going to do that, and I believe, hand on heart, if every member looks at this, a 1% change to the whole of the welfare system, or the whole of the social security system, is not reform, and nobody can ever say it is. It's tinkering around the edges and a missed opportunity. Thank you.
Emma Lewell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to start by thanking my honourable friend from York Central for her diligent and careful work over recent months. I am sad that we've ended up here, because no matter what, regardless of concessions, a vote for this bill today is a vote to plunge 150,000 people into poverty and to tighten eligibility criteria for those who need support the most. Some of us have been here before. In 2015, when the Tories pushed through their welfare and work reform bill, I, along with other colleagues, was persuaded to vote for it on the promise we could change it in committee. It didn't change, and although we voted it down at third reading, the damage was done. Because outside of this place, the nuances of stages of a bill are completely lost. The result was that the savings predicted never materialised. Employment levels did not increase. Instead, there was an increase in poverty, an increase in suicides, a strain on the NHS and other public services, and in the long run, higher welfare spending and reduced growth. Of course I'll give way.
For giving way. She's making an incredibly powerful case, and one of the reasons why none of us should take any lectures from the benches opposite, because she and I were here when the bedroom tax was introduced. We can have many moral arguments about welfare reform, but if you look at the bedroom tax and how little it actually saved in the end, it shows you that actually this way forward isn't the way that we help people into work and ultimately cut our welfare bill.
Thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I remember well the UN rapporteur who said that the benches opposite were engaged in cruelty towards people in this country who needed help the most. But what I cannot fathom today is that a Labour government is not putting in support first and letting that support embed. This is what will reduce the welfare bill and increase employment levels. The impact of any cuts would then not be as drastic. The starting point should never be cuts before proper support. The review being led by my right honourable friend, the Minister for Disabilities, who I have a lot of respect for, is starting to look a little bit predetermined as the change in criteria happens at the same time as the review concludes. It remains unclear how existing claimants with fluctuating conditions are going to be assessed and the impact that these changes will have on carers' allowances. But what we do know is that DLA claimants and those on other legacy benefits will be assessed under the new criteria, putting almost 800,000 disabled children at risk of losing support. The North East region has the highest number of disabled people in England, and the number of people searching for work outpaces the number of available jobs. How on earth will cutting the universal credit health element incentivise those people to go out and find a job that doesn't even exist? And since PIP is an in-work benefit, restricting the very support that can keep people in work will only help to increase unemployment levels. And all of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, for £2.5 billion worth of savings, when we know they are savings that can be made elsewhere. When we know those with the broadest shoulders could pay more, but instead we are once again making disabled people pay the price for the economic mess that the party opposite left us. As it stands, we are being asked to vote blind today. There is no new bill. There are no new explanatory notes. There is no fully updated impact assessment. There is no time for sufficient scrutiny. No formal consultation has taken place with disabled people. The majority of employment support will not be in place until the end of the decade. Access to work remains worse than ever before, and we are creating a 2-tier, possibly 3-tier benefit system where we know for certain that disabled people are going to be worse off. This is not a responsible way for any of us to legislate. It is predicted that disabled people will lose on average £4,500 per year. Yet we know that they already need an extra £1,095 per month just to have the same standard of living as non-disabled households. There's a reason why 138 organisations representing disabled people are against this bill. There is a reason why there is not a single organisation that has come out in support of it. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am pleading with MPs today, please do not do this. For those on my own benches, staying loyal to your party today may feel good in this place, but once you go home, once you're in your individual constituency, the reality of this will hit, and it will hit very hard. Just like in 2015, I'm concluding my comments, sorry. Just like in 2015, constituents will never forgive, and it will haunt those MPs who voted for it. I, of all people, should know.
Well said.
Tom Morrison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I come here today fueled by the voices of hundreds of my constituents, and I want to speak to the harm that I think this bill will cause if rushed through the House. How a society treats its most vulnerable members is a real reflection of its progression and intent. And despite recent U-turns and last-minute changes, people, including children, will be pushed into poverty because of this bill.
Will the honourable member give way?
Please.
Thank you. Does the honourable member agree with me that changing life-critical benefits in a rush, gambling with people's futures without evidence, and only listening when your backbenchers rebel is simply not how governments govern at their best?
Thank you for those comments, and I do wholeheartedly agree. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've already said, many of my constituents have raised their fears, worries and anxieties about these plans. And as they've been unable to provide their own stories directly because of the government's lack of consultation, I want to use my time to be their voice.
Welcome. Well, thank you all for joining us here today. I'm reminded by my colleagues from India, Australia, and Japan that within an hour of becoming the Secretary of State of the United has developed over the years and that I think has really taken wing in the last few months, and we want to continue to build on. These are very important countries. These are very important strategic partners and allies of the United States, and together we have a lot of shared priorities, a lot of things we care about in the world. I think there are many global problems, but also problems that we face in our respective countries that can be solved by us cooperating together. One of the challenges upon coming, although this is a great partnership and a great forum in which to discuss these issues, one of the challenges has been something new like this, is turning meetings and gatherings where we talk about ideas and concepts into a vehicle for action, into a vehicle for actually being able to take concrete actions. And that's the next step in this great partnership, is to actually begin to see concrete actions and steps being taken in conjunction with one another, in coordination with one another, in partnership with one another, for the benefit of our respective countries and ultimately of many other countries in the world. There are many countries that are going to benefit from this partnership even though they're not members of it. And it's not simply a security matter. It's largely, in many cases, about economic development. In fact, later today we'll be hosting here in this building a number of companies. I think over 30 or 40 companies was the last count, representing all four of our countries, companies that are doing businesses in these countries or who are domiciled in these countries and who are going to be visiting here to talk about things we can work together on. And there are many topics that we can work on and focus on. One that I've personally been very focused on is diversifying the global supply chain of critical minerals, not just access to the raw material, but also access to the ability to process and refine it to usable material. It's critical for all technologies and for all industries across the board. And so having a diverse and reliable global supply chain of these is just one example of many that we can focus on and build upon and achieve some real progress on. So that's the hope for this partnership. That's why it's so important to host it here today. And in addition to the bilateral relationships we have with each of the three partner nations that are here, it's also important within this forum to turn it into one where we begin to focus on specific issues that we want to work together on and begin to deliver action on those issues. And today's the next step in that process. It's an honor to host them. And now I'm going to ask who's become a friend. I've seen him a number of times now in just 6 months on the job, and I was just telling him how much he travels. I follow the news, and every time I see he's somewhere else in the world, so he's been very busy. But my colleague from India, who will be followed by my colleague from Australia, and then, of course, Japan, who I've also seen quite a number of times. In fact, I've seen you more than my own children, because he's at some of the same forums that we've been on, and it's been an important partnership as well. So I'm grateful to all of you for being here today. Welcome to the State Department. Welcome to Washington. And I look forward to visiting you in your respective countries as well, and for the progress that we're making together in this very, very important partnership and forum that we've created. So thank you. Thank you. Thank
you. I'm very pleased to be back in DC for the second time this year for a Quad Foreign Ministers meeting. And let me begin by saying that we're all committed to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. To that end, our endeavors are devoted to promoting a rules-based international order. It is essential that nations of the Indo-Pacific have the freedom of choice, so essential to make right decisions on development and security. In the last few months, we have made significant progress in Quad initiatives. They include the maritime domain, logistics, education, and political coordination. We will be discussing that in greater detail. The working of the Quad has also been made more efficient through streamlining the working groups. A more cohesive, nimble, and focused Quad will certainly help deliver better. Quad is about deepening our convergence and expanding our common ground. I value our consultations on different dimensions of the Indo-Pacific in that regard. A lot is happening in the world, and I'm sure that our exchange of views will be very valuable for all of us. A word about terrorism in the light of our recent experience. The world must display zero tolerance. Victims and perpetrators must never be equated. And India has every right to defend its people against terrorism, and we will exercise that right. We expect our Quad partners to understand and appreciate that. India plans to host the next Quad summit. We have some proposals on how to make that productive. I'm sure so do our partners. We will discuss, and I'm sure we will agree. Once again, I thank Secretary Rubio for hosting us today, and I look forward to our discussions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's really wonderful to be back here in Washington. It was such an honour to be asked, be invited to attend the inauguration of President Trump in January and to attend it with my colleagues from India and Japan. And Secretary Rubio, it was indeed your first few hours of being the Secretary of State. It was such an honour to meet with you, and I look forward. Thank you for the engagement over particularly this last little period with the Middle East, and then obviously we look forward to your visit to the ASEAN set of meetings in our region. We understand how important this partnership is. It is such an important partnership for the world, it's such an important partnership for our region, it's such an important partnership for the countries represented. The importance of our partnership is highlighted by the urgency of the strategic challenges that we all face. In his testimony to his confirmation hearings, the Secretary spoke about the future of the 21st century being made in this region, being shaped in this region, and Australia agrees. This is a very important Quad meeting, as always, and unfortunately we meet against the backdrop of conflict and of escalating competition. So it has never been more important for us to harness our collective strength for peace, for stability, for prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and for all our peoples. These four countries represent nearly a quarter of the world's population and over a third of global GDP. We are independent, sovereign nations. We bring our own perspectives, our own interests, and we also know this, that we are stronger when we work together. Whether it's when we respond to emergencies, as we did, when we together mobilise quickly to support communities affected by the deadly earthquakes in Myanmar, or cooperating on issues which are critical to the region's security and prosperity, such as technology, supply chains and maritime security. Practical cooperation, which is all designed to make all of us safer in a region which continues to change. I'm very grateful to be hosted again by the Secretary for this, our second Quad meeting in 6 months, and I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
本日マルコのイニシアティブで、本年2回目の日米豪印外相会合を開催できることを大変嬉しく思います。マルコが国務省に初登庁して数時間後に開催された本年1月の外相会合開催は、国際社会に対して前向きで力強いメッセージとなりました。
Today, I am pleased to convene the second Quad Foreign Ministers meeting of this year, thanks to Marco's initiative. The previous Foreign Ministers meeting in January took place just a few hours after Marco's first day at the State Department, and I believe that sent a positive and a strong message to the international community.
それから半年のタイミングで再度日米豪印の外相がワシントン DC に集うことができたのはクアッドの結束の強さと重要性を示すものであります。
The fact that the four foreign ministers are once again gathering here in Washington, D.C. only 6 months later demonstrates the strength of the unity and the importance of the Quad.
現在、中東や欧州では様々な混乱が起きております。 我々4カ国が位置するインド太平洋は世界人口の半数以上を要する世界経済の成長エンジンであり、インド太平洋地域の平和と安定は国際社会の繁栄にとって不可欠であります。インド太平洋地域の平和と安定のために、地域の大国である日米豪印4カ国が果たせる役割は大変大きなものがございます。
Currently, there is turmoil in the Middle East and Europe. The Indo-Pacific region, where our 4 countries are located, is the growth engine of the global economy, accounting for more than half of the world's population. With this, the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific region are essential for the prosperity of the international community. The 4 countries, as major powers in the region, have an important role to play in ensuring peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region.
本日は現下の国際情勢について戦略的な観点から議論を深めたいと思います。また、自由で開かれたインド太平洋の実現のために、地域諸国に裨益する今後の協力などについてしっかりと意見交換したいと思います。ありがとうございます。
Today, I'm looking forward to engaging in in-depth strategic discussions on the current international situation. Additionally, we will exchange views on future cooperation that will benefit countries in the region in order to advance the realization of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.